How can one man's passion turn himself into one of the most dynamic and famous brands in all of fashion? Stick around to this insane retelling of Louis Vuitton's life to find out. Almost all of us know about Louis Vuitton these days, especially their handbags and logos, which are some of the most sought after in the world. Louis was much more than just a tailor or fashion designer though, as he was also able to create an empire from just his charm and connections alone. Make sure you stick around for the whole story too, since Louis Vuitton's tale of success is perfect for people looking to gain an edge in the business world. Chapter 1. Studying under Monsieur Marechal. Louis Vuitton was not a regular man, and his story has plenty of twists and turns that help explain how he became an international icon. Vuitton lived in Paris and was born in 1821. He would have called himself an entrepreneur, and he was an expert in creating with his hands. He would live a harsh life before leaving his family home at the age of 13 to make it out in Paris, a place that was in the middle of an identity crisis. Paris was home to some of the best artists, inventors, and entertainers in the world at the time, but it was also home to extreme poverty too. This backdrop would help define Louis's life, especially since he shared a bit in common with both communities. Louis, who had done odd jobs all the way to Paris after leaving home, once again returned to doing things here and there as he tried to plant roots in the City of Lights. Louis Vuitton would eventually find his way to working in a workshop under Monsieur Marechal, a box maker and packer. Back during this time period, box making was considered a very respectable and artistic lifestyle that paid pretty well too. Louis would learn a lot under this man, and after only a few short years, his name would become pretty popular in Paris. The trunks that Louis Vuitton still sell today are based off the concepts that he learned during this period in time, and Louis was clearly inspired when he was working under Marechal. Vuitton would find a way to create crates and specialty boxes that were not only light as a feather, but also were completely waterproof too. People had grown to appreciate Louis' skill at the craft a great deal, and it wouldn't take long for important people to start reaching out to the young artist. Chapter 2. Napoleon and Vuitton cross paths. There may not be a person more well known in French politics than Napoleon Bonaparte, who actually rose to the throne around the same time that Louis Vuitton was finding his way in the French art space. In 1851, only 16 years after Louis had first arrived in Paris, Napoleon III would assume the title of Emperor of the French and re-establish the French Empire under his name. This turn of events would end up playing a huge role in his success, and was a truly fortunate turn of events. Louis would work very closely with Napoleon's wife, and they would form a truly unique bond. Louis Vuitton would build the Spanish Countess boxes, and she would grow to rely on him for all of her fashion needs. He was tasked with packing the most beautiful clothes in an exquisite way, and he was more or less free to create as he saw fit. Napoleon's wife loved Louis's creative vision, and this gave him a platform like most artists dream of. The Countess provided Louis Vuitton with a gateway into the truly elite. With her seal of approval, it didn't take long for Louis's work to become the talk of the town, and for him to be commissioned for even more work. Royalty and the extremely wealthy all fought to have Louis Vuitton work for them, and just like that, his work was elevated to a whole other level. For the rest of Louis's life, his work would be entwined with the wealthiest people in the country, and this is part of the reason for why his reputation has remained so solid even over 100 years later. People trusted the quality of work that he was always putting out. Once Louis was given this opportunity, he never looked back and began to build an empire that still stands tall today. But before we get into that, please consider leaving a like if you're enjoying this video so far, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Chapter 3. Building something to last. Louis Vuitton had spent enough time with royalty to know that a lifetime isn't enough. He wanted to build something that would stick around long after his life, and he just had to figure out how to actually go about achieving that. He would find love in 1854 and promptly marry her after a period of courtship. He would leave his master's shop in an effort to open his own box-making business, and he would immediately get to work on tipping the entire industry on its head. In 1858, only 4 years after opening up his own business, Louis Vuitton would once again innovate on his designs. He would create a box that wasn't made of leather, but instead of a kind of gray canvas. This canvas was lighter, more durable, and less likely to suffer from odor or water issues than the leather design. But that wasn't even the most important part. This canvas design allowed for a rectangular design, one that is similar to the suitcases and luggage that we have today. With this design, Louis would be able to stack boxes on top of each other and use room more efficiently than any other company at the time. This design is chiefly responsible for the luggage that we know today, and it was invented in Louis' workshop all those years ago. As you would probably be able to expect, it didn't take long at all for the new design to catch on. They were especially popular for people that traveled on the train, and the design completely changed how the industry at the time was looking. Advances in transportation that were being made around the same time also increased the demand for the rectangular suitcases, and this new style of cargo was pushed even harder by companies as a result. Suddenly, Louis was working hand in hand with rail and boat companies to help improve their systems, and the bags became the most popular style of bag in the mid to late 19th century. This latest idea of Louis Vuitton definitely kept him busy, and he would expand his operations only a couple months later. A far larger warehouse was built outside of Paris, and Louis would adapt in an effort to keep up with demand. Louis was not only receiving requests from French royalty at this point though, but also from those in power over in Egypt. People all over the world were starting to take notice with what was going on in France, and Louis Vuitton's status was only elevated. France had long since been known as the country on the cutting edge, and at this moment they definitely lived up to the billing. Things moved like clockwork all the way up to 1870. War was starting to hit France, and for the first time, Louis's work suffered. Factors outside of his control kept popping up, and Louis was forced to shift his focus to other things. In 1871, Louis would return to his newest workshop only to find it having been reduced to rubble. The conflict had personally affected him, and he couldn't do anything other than look on in disappointment as the damage impacted his life's work. Louis Vuitton refused to give in though, despite everything working against him. In that moment, he was just as stubborn as he was as a boy, wandering from his small homes to Paris just to make his dreams work. Louis would go about moving and rebuilding his workshop, and in a location less susceptible to attacks. A year later, Louis would have his business fully up and running again, and he even would unveil a new design. The box was beige with red stripes, and became a favorite amongst the wealthy and elite. This would mark the first step that Louis would make in turning his brand into a legitimate luxury brand. Louis would work on the brand for the next 20 years before finally passing away. He had become a legend in the industry, and even passed on his knowledge to his own son. The next generation of Vuittons would come up with the iconic LV logo that is still found today, but the foundation was already set with the iconic colors and quality of the boxes. Eventually, Louis Vuitton would move into clothes and other luxury fashion endeavors, but they got their start with just boxes and luggage. It's hard to believe how much one man had to do just to turn his own name into a name that would still be relevant hundreds of years later. And that was the insane story of Louis Vuitton. What do you think was more interesting? Louis Vuitton having to overcome literal warfare to keep his business running, or that he worked personally with Napoleon and his wife? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos.